all of these bank employees are on their lunch hour too, and they're walking in and out, and we're this like legal aid union just having a picket, and we've got our signs, we've got like a loudspeaker, and we get messages from upstairs saying, well, I can hear you guys from up here, so that the executive director can hear you from her office, because she's in the office, and I can hear you, so she can hear you.
All right. Welcome to Fight Back Radio, a production of fightbacknews.org, taking you to the heart of the people's struggle. I'm your host, Richard Berg, and today I'm here with Louise Carhart, who's a member of the United Legal Workers here in Chicago. She's a member of the executive committee of that union. She was recently elected chief steward and is the staff attorney for the Farm Worker Project of that union. The United Legal Workers is affiliated with a national amalgamated union called the National Organization of Legal Services, which in turn is affiliated with the United Auto Workers, Local 2320. Do I have that right, Louise?
Yeah, it's confusing, but our local is all across the country, so
all right,
it's pretty big.
Welcome to Fight Back Radio.
I'm excited to be here. Yeah.
So let me ask you right from the start then. So you're a lawyer and you work for legal services, providing legal services to poorer people, but you're in the United Auto Workers Union. That may be confusing to some of our Fight Back Radio listeners, or probably to other people as well. Can you tell us a little bit about why that is or how that works?
Yeah. So UAW, obviously, their main membership has been historically from auto workers, aerospace workers, engineers. But we, in I think like the 80s, the 90s, UAW was reaching out and really like kind of pioneered this idea of organizing spaces that weren't necessarily trade related shops. So grad student unions, various nonprofits, and you do most of the nonprofits you see organized, I think, are legal aid and legal services, because I don't know exactly like what the culture is at other nonprofits, but I think legal workers are generally, especially if you're working in a nonprofit, you're pretty advocacy minded, you're pretty up to date on current affairs, and it's just an organizing space that really lends itself to being a part of a union. Yeah.
Okay. So look, I want to talk to you a little bit about your most recent contract battle. You settled your contract not that long ago, and can you tell us a little bit about how what the start of the campaign? You were, your previous contract, you'd signed an extension because of the COVID times primarily, and like a lot of labor, people got a little lethargic probably.
Yeah.
And so, can you tell us about the early days of your contract campaign, and as some of the union leaders started getting together, what you were thinking about and what that looked like?
Yeah. So something that was exciting about this contract campaign, I had been on so I was on the bargaining committee this bargaining cycle, and then I was on the bargaining committee in 2023 when we were bargaining, an offered extension that we ended up rejecting. And it was between, the 2023 and 2024 bargaining cycles. It was exciting because we brought on a lot of new people who, we had a new employment attorney who was she had been in a grad student union when she was in law school. We brought on a paralegal who is just really knowledgeable about organizing people, and we recruited we just had a lot of new people who were really excited about the union and were excited about the idea of improving just everybody's working conditions instead of sort of accepting status quo contract language that had been offered to us for years. The union had lost some momentum I've only been there 2 years, but I was an intern previously. I'd been around for a while. And the union had kind of lost momentum, hadn't organized around like principles. It was more, we just want more money, and there's no like real strategy. And that's not to say that like other bargaining units or bargaining cycles didn't go well, or people weren't doing a good job, but we just were able to harness a lot more excitement going into this bargaining cycle, which was awesome and really exciting. And I think we had also we started bargaining right after the Big Three contract was signed.
Okay, so it was right after the auto workers had strikes across the country, which created an excitement for all of organized labor, not just the
definitely.
UAW. But how did you tap into that? How did you harness it for your place? What kinds of things did you do to get lawyers and for that matter non-lawyers excited about your contract?
Yeah, so we have a local here in Chicago, UAW 551, that is a manufacturing plant for Ford, and they had taken part in the stand-up strike that we saw during the UAW contract fight. And
we had Scott Holdelson on Fight Back Radio not that long ago, so yeah, some of our listeners are familiar with that plant even.
Yeah, and they we organized some of our members to go out there and help on their picket lines, go to like a barbecue with them. As they were fighting their fight, I guess our members could see this is what an organized union looks like. This is what a union that's like activated and willing to fight for larger than usual concessions. This is what they do. They go out and, I think you can be a part of this was like a big motivating factor for a lot of people, knowing that they could, that we were part of this larger union that was making history and taking a new approach to bargaining. And I think that really helped us going then into our own bargaining cycle. And
did you have some issues with division because you have a lot, your bargaining unit is almost half attorneys, but then the other half is people who are much lower wage workers, paralegals and IT and others. Is there a division or a tendency to just say, let's take care of these guys and not those guys? And how do you deal with that?
I think a big part of that division, because there definitely is a divide, the majority of our membership, I think, is staff attorneys, and there's a huge difference between someone who is coming out of a graduate program and starting this very like professional career, versus when you look at someone who's just out of college and is starting as a paralegal or has been an accountant. The needs and I think perspectives are really different, but especially for our staff attorneys, it's easy for staff attorneys to relate to the supervisors in our workplace, in our agency, because those are all attorneys. And the majority of people who can move up in the agency are all attorneys. And there's not, you can be a paralegal and then you could be a senior paralegal, and that's where it sort of ends. There's not a lot of advancement there. So yeah, that is definitely like a divide that we had to bridge, and it works to our advantage that, our work is working with people who are disadvantaged, right? Our work is helping people just for the sake of helping people.
So it was somewhat natural for once it was posed, for attorneys to say, "Oh, we should support our union sisters and brothers who are disadvantaged," because that's what I do every day on my job.
Yeah, and I think we all, if you're a staff attorney at a legal aid, you went to school with people who ended up working for a big law firm, who was making like triple what you're making right out of law school. So you're sort of you're used to this idea of like, I know I'm making a lot less than people I graduated with. And if I'm making a lot less, then the paralegal who works for me is definitely not making probably what they should be making, given their contribution to the work. And I think, yeah, we definitely had some issues of staff attorneys saying like, oh, well, what they're being offered is good enough. It's good enough for me. Like, I am seeing my salary rise as much as I would like it to. And I'm not super worried about case caps or limiting the amount of work that I take on, because I don't have a problem with burnout, or I don't have a problem with being overwhelmed at work. And once we started bringing in the paralegal perspective, or like the accounting perspective, or IT, it was clear that there were improvements that could be made that wouldn't necessarily, benefit staff attorneys exclusively. But I think once you realize that, like, if we are lifting up all of our members, all of our working conditions are going to improve. Everyone's going to be happier. We have a huge issue with turnover, especially with paralegals, because they are so poorly paid and overworked. And as an attorney, that makes it really hard to, maintain a good rapport with clients, because you want clients to have a recognizable face. You want them to feel like this person who's worked on their case has been working on it the whole time, and they know them, and they feel comfortable reaching out to them if they have questions. So turnover really, it's not easy to be retraining people to, to be teaching someone how to use, like our legal software and stuff, every 6 months. That's just not practical. So I think from the beginning, we made retention our biggest goal. How do we increase retention? What does increased retention look like? Where does it come from? And obviously a big part of that is salaries, but we also want to be able to offer, a good amount of paid leave for people who, who come to the agency. We want to be able to offer good, compassionate leave, which is what we turned bereavement leave into. We want parental leave to be good enough so that people feel like they can continue working here and have a family. And that was a big refrain as well, we wanted Legal Aid Chicago to be a place where you could have a family and have a career, and not necessarily have to choose between one because you're losing so much on childcare, or you only have 30 days of parental leave, and no matter what, you're going to have to take unpaid leave after that. Just looking beyond just salary as a way to increase retention was a big thing for us.
So what kind of pushback? I mean, these seem like all reasonable demands.
Right,
these are it doesn't sound like, oh wow, you want to people have a family. What's wrong with you? It's so what kind of pushback did you get from the employer? And how did you all deal with that? How did you keep your team united going forward around what you felt you needed?
I think one of the good things about the pushback was it felt so surprising to everybody in the unit. It felt surprising to all of our members that management was pushing back on what it was. The biggest pushback we got was on what we called case caps. So putting a limit on the amount of clients, on the amount of cases that you could take on. And I think, as a unit, we had taken it for granted that management understood that we were overworked, that we were feeling burnt out, that people didn't feel like they could take their paid time off because they were going to come back to a mountain of work, and it was just going to make their life so much harder when they got back from taking any kind of leave. So, and I think we had assumed that management knew about that, and knew that it was an issue because we saw it so much with management as well. Not a lot of management takes a lot of paid time off. It's encouraged, to take on as many cases as you can. They don't necessarily have a limit to what they're taking on. And when we were bargaining this, we were told, oh, this has never come up. This has never been an issue before. It's never been an issue that people are feeling burnt out, people are feeling overworked, or people are feeling overwhelmed. And that really struck a chord with our members because it made it feel, it really made it feel like management, there was just such a disconnect between what management thought was happening and what was actually happening in practice groups and among our members. And I think people really didn't like to be told that, no, like we actually manage really well here in terms of work. We do workload management really well here. And you're being told that in a bargaining session, but then you're going into work every day and, you're stressed out. You're not able to complete all of the things that you're supposed to, and you're constantly on intake, you're constantly taking on new cases. So to hear, that's not really a huge issue here, and then go back to work the next morning, that was just a huge galvanizing issue for our membership. And I think it was also, it's an interesting issue because it really ties together a lot of different aspects of a contract, right? If I'm getting paid more, I'm not going to feel like I'm so overworked. If I get more PTO, I have more time to recover from being overworked. If I have case caps, that means that I am more comfortable taking paid time off because I'm not worried about what I'm going to come back to at the end of my paid time off. So it was, it definitely wasn't an issue that we expected to turn into such a big fight. And it was. Traditionally, we bargain non-economic items first, and then we move into the economics.
Right, and that's typical of most negotiations.
And this was an issue, the case caps, the workload management was an issue that we bargained the whole cycle. So it carried over. It was, a big issue that we kind of didn't predict to blow up in the way that it did.
So you started by saying, well, they'll accept this, then they didn't. And then you said, well, they just don't get it. We'll make a few reasonable arguments.
Right.
They didn't get it.
Yeah.
And a few more. Then you got agitated, you got angry, and you got made more sharp arguments. But ultimately, how did not just on this, but other issues as well? How did were you able to use your leverage to actually make enough gains to settle the contract?
Yeah. We did. I think, in my opinion, we did a really good job of keeping membership involved in our bargaining, and that. We have Allison Brown, who's the president, chief, co-chair, chair. She is the chair now of our executive committee. To her credit, she was great at always reminding us, this needs to be transparent. We need to keep members involved. We need members to have some kind of a voice at all times in everything that we do. And obviously, part of being on a bargaining committee is knowing that there are limits to that you have to be able to make decisions as things come up. You need to be able to make proposals without needing to then go back to the membership and being like, oh, is this okay? Because it needs to be fast paced at times. And so that, we did weekly surveys. We had a newsletter that went out every week. We contact people through WhatsApp. We would contact them through their personal emails. We went through their work emails. We were on, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, all of that. And I think especially in a union that COVID sort of like stalled us and took away some of our momentum, social media, connecting, not necessarily in person, was a huge way to overcome that for us. And, people really like if they can, share something on their social media that they're proud of, and looks good. I think, that's going to give you pride in what you're working for, and just get you more involved. And, surveys are great. I have offered to help, other people in our local with the surveys that they are putting out for their membership, because I think just you can't have every perspective on a bargaining committee. You're not going to have it coming from all perspectives, and your bargaining committee meetings are not going to encompass the entire unit. You hope they do, and you try your best to make sure that they do. But a survey, just even if someone has a minority opinion and is voicing it in a survey, at least you're seeing it, you're considering it, and trying to address it in a public way. And
so did that communication help you keep the unity? Because in a contract negotiation, you ask for a lot of things, but you whittle it down and you move towards and you give up things until you reach an agreement, until it's a compromise with the boss. So ultimately, all contracts are that. And so, some people, people might have different views of what's important.
Right, definitely.
And so as you compromise on one person's view and take a strong stand on another, that can cause division. So how did you deal with that kind of thing, and how did you make the decisions?
I think we focused on this idea of we want our lowest paid workers to have a livable wage. We want their lives to be improved. And something that I tried to stress and think of was, we need to have identifiable goals. And yes, one of our goals is having the best contract for our entire unit. But if a sub goal on that is retention, then we need to work towards retention. And people are going to disagree with exactly how we get there. And they're going to disagree with separate parts of the contract, things that we're emphasizing. But if we're able to zoom out and look at it and say, okay, is this eventually going to get us towards the goal of retention? Then, we need to maintain that as a goal. So people know what we're working towards, instead of, having people just throw ideas out and saying, oh, well, we could try this, we could try this. And, your idea that you're throwing out, it has to narrow down to this idea of retention, or the idea of getting a higher salary or more PTO. I think that was really helpful, having identifiable goals that people could say, well, my idea works towards this in this way. And that helps keep people focused. But yeah, there's always division. There's going to be division. You can't overcome that. You're never not going to have division.
Right. So let me ask you. I mean, this negotiation got nasty, though. I mean, it was the employer gave you what they call a last, best, and final offer, which for our Fight Back Radio listeners, it sounds like a whatever double or super whammy.
Yeah.
And I guess it is that, because it's a legal phrase that employers will use to indicate that if you don't agree to this, we might just implement it anyways. We might say, to heck with you. Take it or leave it. We're going to do this. And so they have to, negotiate in good faith and all these other things, which are, that's not what it sounds like either. It means they need to show up and sit there mostly. Right. But you got to this point, so that indicates a more, a more nasty negotiation on their part.
Right.
And how did you get to that point, and then how did you deal with it?
So it is interesting, because they actually never said the words last, best, final, which I don't know if you're interested in labor law. Those are the magic words, that's what sends you to a contract vote. And instead, we were showing up at the table and we were disagreeing on salary, basically. We were disagreeing on the financials. We were disagreeing on what was available. And a big part of this was because Legal Aid Chicago in February received a relatively big grant from Mackenzie Scott, who is Jeff Bezos' ex-wife. And she's been, doling out money to different nonprofits. And when Legal Aid Chicago got that money, they said, this is all going towards staff salary. This is all going towards developing staff salaries, increasing pay. And we were like, that's great. Awesome. good thing bargaining is coming up. We're going to divvy that up. And that's, going to be money that's available to us. And then whenever Legal Aid Chicago was presenting their financials to us, it wasn't taking that money into account. So they would say, this is how much it will cost the agency to implement the ULW's proposal, but leaving out that it was $3.6 million and leaving that out. And then it went from, this is going to improve employees to, we also have to offer management raises, and that to a lot of our members was upsetting because management is clearly making enough money, and we have paralegals who are qualifying for the same benefits that they're helping their clients apply for. And to
like
us,
housing and
right, so like housing, food stamps, Medicaid, or not Medicaid because we have employee health insurance, but a lot of our employees,
terrible.
right, and I think we also had employees who were then seeing their clients, seeing how much their clients making, and saying that's as much as I make or more. If you can qualify for your own services, your morale's really low. And if you're then hearing, we had like an emergency meeting when we found out about this grant from Mackenzie Scott. And so we all like dropped everything. We all hop on the Zoom call to be told that we're getting these millions of dollars and it's going to go towards employees. And if you're, a paralegal on food stamps and you're hearing that, you're like, great, hopefully I can get off food stamps. And then we get into bargaining and you're hearing, some of that money has to go towards management raises. And we can't raise your wages to, I think we were using the MIT, I would have to double check, but they have like a livable wage calculator for like the Chicago Naperville area, Chicago Naperville Elgin, and that was saying you need to make $50K if you want to make a livable wage in Chicago, and so that's where we wanted our lowest paid workers to be lifted up to at least $50K.
That's reasonable.
Yeah, and instead we're hearing, well, we need to give management raises, so we can't lift you up to $50K.
Oh boy.
And I think that, especially because we have a membership that feels so close to management because we work with them every day. Some of my supervisors, when I was a paralegal, I was at a private firm before I went to law school, and I worked with some of my supervisors now at that law firm. So you get close, and there's like a camaraderie in working on these cases, and you feel really close to your supervisors. And then to hear, just that you're not going to get the money that you deserve, and that would really make your life a lot easier, was really upsetting to people. And then to have, in addition, being told like, I don't think you're that overworked. I don't think you need to limit a limit of how many cases you can have. I don't think paralegals have their own cases was something that we heard as well, which is just not true. We have a lot of paralegals who manage their own cases. We have paralegals who go before judges and advocate for clients without an attorney there. So it just built to a point where we felt like there was a lack of understanding with management of the actual material conditions that our membership was experiencing, and there was an unwillingness to move on any of our demands. That it all just like culminated in, we had management saying, we'll go to mediation. We think that's a good idea. And then when asked, well, what are we mediating if you've said that you're not going to move on anything? Like, we're just going to mediation for the mediator to say, accept the contract,
Yeah, right.
And
just for Fight Back Radio listeners that aren't familiar with negotiations, a mediator there's an agency that just does this mediation, but the idea of they're supposed to do is get the two sides together to agree. It's called the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Service, and but it doesn't require either side to move at all or to do anything, and it can be a game sometimes that one side or the other tries to use to say, oh, we're trying to get stuff done here,
Right.
and that sounds like what they were trying to do
Yeah,
there.
yeah. And I think something with the mediation aspect, we put it out to a survey. We surveyed members. We asked, do you think we should go to mediation? Do you think we should just vote on the contract? What do you want to do? And so people spent time working on this survey, responding, giving very thoughtful responses. And it turned out, people were saying, yes, go to mediation. And then we get to the table and management is saying, we don't actually think mediation is where we want to go. And that was just another blow to our membership.
Yep.
Was hearing, no, we don't actually want, even if, I myself don't really think that mediation would have been helpful. I think for a lot of people, it was a good idea to signal to management, like, we're willing to do anything. We are willing to work with you. And that was worth taking mediation. And to then have it just taken away, especially after, spending a weekend thinking about it, responding to a survey, participating in meetings, and for a lot of our membership, educating themselves on what mediation was, to then have it taken away and told, no, just vote on this, did not help management's chances with a contract.
Well, at about this time, you had a picket line and a rally in front.
Yeah.
If I can just, and I know Louise, he wrote an article for Fight Back News as well, which we can take in the show notes. But I went to the rally, and it just to set the stage, especially if you're not from Chicago. Their office is on LaSalle Street, which is like the Wall Street of the Midwest, and it's the Department of the Treasury is there, where there's billions of dollars in vaults and stuff, and
like physically,
really physically there, and the Board of Trade, and the Mercantile Exchange, and the Rookery Building, which is a very fancy building by Louis Sullivan. So it's like the heart of the wealth of the Midwest, and some of the most richest people in the world's money is rolling through there, and so then legal aid's there as well, and so and it was a sight. It was actually very exciting. It was but the picket line was these legal aid workers who were both lawyers and paraprofessionals or paralegals. And the picket line for was militant. You could tell people had it, and were willing to maybe they hadn't picketed so much in their life, but they were willing to picket then, and you could feel the emotions coming out. And so, could you talk a little bit about what led up to that, how you dealt with that, and then the picket line and what happened afterwards?
Yeah, the picket line was amazing. It was I really loved it, especially because, when we were on the picket, I'm handing signs out and everything. And my coworkers were coming up to me and they were like, we did it in the middle of the day on our lunch break. And they were like, oh, I just came from supervision with my supervisor and they just assigned me this many cases and I'm really upset about it. I'm so glad I have a place to come yell about it. Just people were excited to be able to picketing is great because it gives people an actual space to participate in bargaining or to participate in union life. If you're showing up at the bargaining table and you're not on the bargaining committee, you're not, engaging with management. And this gives you a chance to engage with management. And obviously, we have a lot of very politically active members who are, they're in DSA or different organizations. They're protesting on the weekends, and so we do have members who are interested in protests, have been through this before, and then we have members who this was like the first act of civil disobedience that people are engaging in, and it was really cool. We had our receptionist show up and they switched off so that one of them could be at the picket line and the other one was manning the table or the front desk, and they switched off and they both were able to make it. And
that's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
It just, we hadn't had actions like that before. Before, our actions were mostly, we put up posters around our office, which are really effective as well. It's effective, I think, to walk down, like, I love walking down my hallway at work right now because we have these huge posters that Sophia Partita at she's a paralegal for our agency. She did them, and it, like, you just walk down this hallway and every office has a poster on their front door. So it's like, that's really exciting. And I think we really tried to, leading up to the picket, we chose the day of the picket because we wanted it to be after our contract expired. We wanted it to be the day after our contract expired. We had to educate people on, this is protected activity. This is, and you're allowed to engage in this, and it's okay to show up. You're on your work hour. That's your own time, or your lunch hour. That's your own time. You're allowed to use it however you want. We voted on a time, so people were able to say, okay, yeah, this is when I can show up. I have a meeting at this time. So we made sure that, we could get as many people there as possible. We made sure it was the day that most people are in office. And I think that sort of collaborative nature of planning, of not just saying, show up at this time, get ready to yell, saying instead, we're going to work on the best time. We want the most people to be able to show up, really helped, build support and, like, build good showing of people. And we're in a bank building, we're in the CIBC building, so we're this, like, legal aid nonprofit on 2 floors of the building surrounded, and every time you take the elevator up, you go up with, like, bank employees. And I think it was kind of fun. I'm speaking for myself personally. I think this is probably something that other people felt too. It was, like, kind of fun to be like, oh, all of these bank employees are on their lunch hour too, and they're walking in and out, and we're this, like, legal aid union just having a picket, and we've got our signs, we've got, like, a loudspeaker. It was just, it was a great moment, and it was really great too because then we have our WhatsApp group that has everybody in the unit, or as many people as possible. And we get messages from upstairs saying, well, I can hear you guys from up here, so that the executive director can hear you from her office because she's in the office, and I can hear you so she can hear you.
All right.
Yeah, and I, you never want to underestimate, like, the power of giving people a space to yell. Like, I really think that you're going to get people who wouldn't, especially if you make it as convenient as possible and you make people feel as involved as possible leading up to it, like, they're going to show up. And it really helped, I think it really helped as well because then people realized, oh, I can, like, be at work and still advocate for myself. I'm allowed to wear my union t-shirt all day if I want to. I'm allowed to have, we borrowed a button maker, and that was, like, a huge thing for us. It was so much fun. So if you're in a union, you have any money lying around, I would really, really recommend investing in a button maker. Because then, like, we would have meetups at lunch where we would say, okay, we're going to make a bunch of buttons. We're soliciting button designs. And then, like, me and my friend were just on the picket line, like, passing out buttons to all these people, and then everyone gets a button, everyone who shows up, and then you can wear that, that was really exciting for people. And now, even though we have a contract, even though this contract campaign is ended, people still wear their t-shirts to work, just, like, on an off day to say, I'm in a union. People still wear their buttons on their lanyards with their IDs. And I think that is something that we didn't have before. And it's something that can, activity like a picket allows you to feel confident in, like, carrying that forward and keeping it up.
So, well, let's talk with then. So the rally happened, and it was a success by any stretch. I mean, it was just.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, it was. You could feel it, and everything Louise said. I'll vouch for that being true. But so from there, then you came to an agreement. Can you talk about how that happened and what you won in this agreement, and it was ratified, and where you're at now?
Yeah. So actually, after the picket line, our voting closed on the first proposal, and we voted it down. Which was an outcome that we, as the bargaining committee, we were happy with, we were fine with. And we went back to the table, and we were able to, actually, it was really interesting in the middle of all of this, like, something happened with our tech, so no one was allowed back into the office. So we have a member whose father is a labor lawyer, and we went to his office to bargain, which was kind of cool because it was like, we're in this office with like Cesar Chavez posters up and like just different like May Day posters. And it was kind of fun to be like, okay, now we're on our turf. Like, yeah, that was a really, really great bargaining session. But anyway, we were able to get a couple more, we got 3 more holidays, we call them floating holidays, but it's basically just PTO. And we were able to we went from, we kept the staff attorney and we call them exempt workers. So like staff attorneys, accountants, social workers. We did keep them at a 9% raise, but we were able to get a 10% raise for non-exempt, so people who are subject to overtime laws.
So the lower wage workers were able to get a little more than the...
Yeah, exactly. And we were able to get them, up to 10% raises, which that had been our goal was, we wanted a 10% raise across the board, but if we considered it a success to get it for our lowest paid workers. And, so those were the things that we were able to, extract from management.
That's good. It sounds like a victory. So, still some things to fight for next time.
Yeah. And that's the thing about bargaining is you're always going to be like, oh, there's so much more we could have done. There was so much more that we wanted. And you sort of like get lost in like, we wanted the 10% raise across the board, but we only got it. And it's like, no, that's still a victory. There's still things that you can count as a victory.
So let me ask you about, so you're a member of the United Auto Workers. You talked about the strike against Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis or Chrysler, and how that inspired you. There was there's a whole thing. There was a new president of the United Auto Workers, Sean Fain. There's a caucus that, Scott Hodelson, who was on here, that you're a member of as well, called Uniting All Workers for Democracy, which is UAWD. Mm-hmm. Could you tell us a little bit about, as a legal aid worker and a member of the UAW, how do you see these changes in the United Auto Workers on a national level, and are they what you were looking for when you were, when you supported Sean Fain?
Yeah. So the elections were actually right as I joined as a full-time employee, so I wasn't an intern anymore, and it was really cool because I did not know too much about the leadership of the UAW, and I got my ballot at home and was like, oh, this is cool, like I get to vote, and I don't know, it was exciting to me. And I just did some research and realized that this is actually a really influential election, that this election actually really mattered. And learned about like the Curry administration, which can
you tell our Fight Back Radio listeners what that is?
Yeah, so the Curry administration was basically, we call them now the admin caucus, and they were what we considered like career union employees. So people who were like far away from their position on the shop floor. And Sean Fain came in as in opposition to that because he had so recently worked the shop floor. He had been, working on car parts in, I think he was in Michigan or Ohio. But so he and some other people started UAWD, and that was sort of the reform caucus in the UAW. And just their goal was, one member, one vote. They wanted to get rid of tier systems and,
where people get paid different amounts for doing the same work.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, so getting to, I think that was really exciting for our members too, and was really helpful. That was 2022, I think, when he was voted in. And so that helped, build momentum as well. And most of our workers did not know, who Sean Fain was for a while. And I think, the ceasefire, the announcement that the UAW was going to support a ceasefire in Palestine really sort of raised the profile of Sean Fain among our members, because
I think it was a big deal in all of labor.
Yeah. It wasn't just us.
I mean, at the time, there was very little opposition to the Zionist genocide.
Yeah.
And the fact that in labor, and in fact, even right now, it's timid.
Yeah.
And the fact that early in the process, this was not, now more recently, you're starting to get more momentum for ceasefire. But at that time, any kind of saying that Palestinians were human beings or didn't deserve to die, seemed to didn't get much traction in the labor movement. And the fact that the United Auto Workers, a very, very large, important, it's situated in the heart of the American economy in auto, took a stand calling for a ceasefire was a big deal. So
yeah, it was, and I think for a lot of our members, they didn't see their union membership as something that related to the outside world or related to bigger issues. And this was, I think, Palestine and supporting a ceasefire has been great for just like for the average union member to realize how important their membership is and what influence unions can have, and that it goes beyond just the workplace. And there are like tangible connections between us and workers in Palestine, that their conditions affect our conditions and vice versa. And I think that really helps people see the value of the fight on their shop floor, and how that, it doesn't just relate to their immediate conditions. There's a bigger fight going on. And I am a member of UAWD, and then I'm also in this Labor for Palestine group that's within the UAW. And it was interesting because we got the news about the ceasefire, that UAW would be supporting a ceasefire, and then pretty soon afterwards the UAW and Sean Fain endorsed President Biden. And I think that was a blow for the Labor for Palestine movement, because it was our opinion, or a lot of people's opinion, that we could have, I think many of us saw it as inevitable that the UAW would endorse Biden, but we thought, what if we had leveraged it better, if we had held out a little bit longer, we could have maybe gotten Biden on board with a ceasefire, that we could have advanced the Palestinian cause in the Democratic Party, instead of just advocating for ceasefire and then endorsing. So I continue to be excited about Sean Fain. I was at Labor Notes, the conference about unions and just the labor movement in general.
Sure.
And I got to see him talk. And yeah, it's really cool. I'm still very proud to, be a part of this union and have someone that is on, sort of the cutting edge of political movements in this country. I'm very proud of that. But, there's always more to be done. And I am of that opinion that we could have held out a little bit longer. We don't have to endorse Biden when he asks us to.
No, I think you're right. I'm a member of the Chicago Teachers Union, and our union also endorsed a ceasefire. And our local union, our national union, has not been so good on this issue. And it was a sharp debate at the time. I think right now it would be more overwhelming.
Yeah.
But it's still, within labor, there's this tie to the Democratic Party, which is a party of the rich. I mean, I can talk about individual Democrats that are good, but ultimately we need to figure out a way for working people to get political power in this country. And
Right.
one of the things we've been advocating here on Fight Back Radio is for people to go to Milwaukee on July 15th for protest the Republican convention, and that no good dirty dog Donald Trump, and as he gets nominated. But also, and I think there's going to be many tens of thousands of people that come to Chicago on August 19th to protest the Democrats, because paying for a genocide is not the values that working class people in this country have. So, I know that you'll be there as
I will
well.
for sure be there. Yeah.
And yes, I mean, I think it's on us to organize union people to protest against Joe Biden and the Democrats for what they've done in Palestine and other things as well, and as well as the Republicans. Right. And we need to, it's not a simple thing in the United States. We need to come up and think about what is a path to political power for working class people.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that especially coming from a union in sort of a non-traditional union workplace, you don't think of like lawyers and think of them as union members, but I think it helps people see the real value of being unionized beyond just, I get a better deal because we have a good CBA. I also now have an inroad to activism. And I think, especially for some of our younger members or just in general, people feel like there might be a barrier to entry to certain fields of activism, and a union could be a great way to facilitate that and to promote, the great thing is that we've been able to take our union group chat and keep it alive, and now people post about different educational programs that are taking place across the city, or say this protest is happening, show up. And it just creates like a kind of like a town square atmosphere for people to go beyond just the workplace and see how they can make a difference beyond just in like how much they get paid.
Yeah, no, that's right. So unfortunately our time is starting to wind down here a little bit. I know that you're in your day job that you work with farm workers, and which are low paid workers, and that's why legal aid is involved there. But we probably don't have too much time to go into that here. But I want to invite you back to have a discussion about the farm worker unions and farm worker rights, and it's an important piece of our society. So hopefully you can come back and we'll have a discussion about agricultural workers. But also I wanted to give you an opportunity, if there's anything that we did not talk about here, or we did not raise, or any points you want to, or things you want to raise about about your union or anything else, now would be a good time.
Yeah, I think my experience has been that being a part of a non-traditional union, being, so many of our union members came out of law school and did not expect to be in a union, didn't know they were in a union. And I think it's obviously really important for those traditional trade unions to exist. And I obviously wholeheartedly support them. But I think that there is a place in the labor movement for nonprofits and for, there are exploited workers everywhere. And I think my experience, if anything, is that there's also power there. And you build solidarity through being in a union like the UAW and saying, we're going to have shop floor workers in Michigan and attorneys in Chicago, and we're all part of the same union, and there's a larger working class struggle that unites us that wouldn't necessarily be visible unless we were all in this union together. And I think that is as much as I like to avoid, like two-party politics or whatever, like that is the value of having a huge union like the UAW. That's the value of having, Teamsters organizing library workers, is that you see these connections, and you see them as a source of power, as opposed to, these divisions and people considering themselves closer to management than to, trade workers or whatever. I think, yeah, there's a huge untapped potential there in American, like just the American working class, just to unite workers in that way, because solidarity is really important throughout your shop and throughout, your national, but it's also really important to realize like the collective power that can be harnessed there, by organizing non-traditional workspaces or non-traditional union workspaces. Yeah, I just, my experience with it has been really good. And I think, I think we could really, the unions should keep, pulling in grad students, pulling in nonprofits, pulling in tech workers. If we grow the union movement, like you only benefit.
No, I think that's good. I mean, it's a good way to end this. I mean, if you're in the working class, you should be in a union.
Yeah.
And you should be active in your union. And if you don't have a union, you should try to figure out how to get one. And it's true, I think, in every sector. We need to figure out Walmart and Amazon and those guys, but we also have to figure out, as you mentioned, the not-for-profit sector. And what we're seeing in higher ed right now is a big expansion of unionization. Starbucks workers are unionized in coffee shops around the country. If you're in the working class, you should be in the union, because that's the only way you're going to have any real power, any real say, and not just be at the whim of the employer. So thank you, Louise, for being our guest on Fight Back Radio.
That was great. I'm so happy that we got to talk about this. I'm excited to talk about agricultural workers. I'm always down to talk about that. Well, so, looking forward to it.
I'm not sure when, but it's going to happen.
Yeah, just whenever you need me.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Well, Louise Carhart, an excellent guest. As she was leaving our studio, she wanted to make sure that I put in the outro here that the United Auto Workers represents the academic working staff at the University of California, and they've been involved in a big fight there. The union voted overwhelmingly to strike over unfair labor practices in regards to the repression that the university has called in against their workers in regards to support that they've done for students who have been protesting the genocide in Gaza of Palestinians. And so, and this is no small thing. The United Auto Workers Local 4811, which represents 48,000 of these workers, has had out on strike workers at the University of California, Santa Cruz, the University of California, Los Angeles, and the University of California, Davis. And recently they've also asked to join the strike UC Santa Barbara, UC San Diego, and UC Irvine, which will bring 31,500 workers out on strike over the issue of Palestine. And this is a political issue, and I think this is some of what Louise was talking about, is that we can, workers and political and social issues can come together and have an impact on not just your work life and giving you power on the job, but through solidarity, stand together and really change the world. And so thank you for reminding us of that, Louise. And we look forward to having you return to talk to us about the battle of the farm workers in the fields, and that there's a rich history to that as well. Finally, before we sign off, I want to encourage Fight Back Radio listeners to get in touch with us. Tell us how we can make this better. We're trying a couple of different things in terms of visual and sound, and we're going to be doing that over the summer. And hopefully, these are things that are geared towards trying to improve the listening quality and the visual, etc. But if there's guests you'd like to see or things that we're doing that you would think we should do differently, please get in contact with us. You can reach me at richard.fightbackradio@gmail.com. Also, if you like what we're doing, tell other people about it. I've said this often. You're our PR firm, and so we need you to, tweet it and put it on Instagram. Give us a thumbs up. You tell other people about it. All these things help people find us. If you're on Twitter or Threads, retweets are better than likes. Although I encourage you to do both. Finally, I want to thank the best production team around: Dodd McColgan, Shane Tremley, Natalie Pranis, and Vince Olson. And I'm Richard Berg for the entire Fight Back Radio team, saying until next time, all power to the people.